Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different as I'm filling in on my dad's channel for him. We got something a little unusual for you. Now, this past weekend was the 2020 NBA All-Star Game, and it was in Chicago. Now, the NBA All-Star Game pretty much signifies the middle of the NBA season. It's a nice little break. Some of the better players get to go out there and play in the dunk contest or the skills challenge or the main All-Star game on the Sunday night of the weekend. And basically signifies, all right, we got 2 months left of the season. Time to start knocking out some more wins. Get a better position for the playoffs because they start around the middle of April. Now, as I'm watching this, I started thinking, I wonder when the last time this event was in Detroit. Now, for those who don't know, the All-Star Game jumps around from city to city, year to year. Not too uncommon like the Super Bowl does. It gets announced a few years out, gives the team and the city time to prepare, to decide festivities, prepare for an influx of people, all that stuff. Now, while the Super Bowl has been hosted in Detroit on two occasions, 2006 and 1982, the NBA All-Star Game has last been in Detroit in 1979, which is very unusual. The Pistons have had multiple great runs with success over the years, and usually if you do that, or you get a new arena or some combination of that, the NBA rewards you with an All-Star Game. You know, show all the country everything your town has to offer. The fact that the Pistons haven't done it in over 40 years is kind of unusual. As you can see, this would have been 1979 was the year that was at the Silverdome. That was just down the road from where I am currently in Pontiac. This was the year after the Pistons moved from the Cobo Hall in downtown Detroit all the way out to the suburbs of Pontiac where they were playing in this stadium. Now, this stadium, of course, was the stadium where the Detroit Lions played and was the first All-Star game that was held in a stadium that was built for baseball or football. Most of the time beforehand, they would just play in arenas that were, for the most part, mixed use between basketball and hockey. Now, we're going to be going over this. We're going to be going through this here today. There's some cool stuff. It's a nice little time capsule of 1979. Back to the point of why it's been so long since the All-Star Game was in the Detroit area, has a lot to do with the fact that a few years after this, in 1988, the Pistons moved up the road to the Palace of Auburn Hills, where they stayed till 2017. Everything I could find out about why during that time period where they won 3 NBA championships, were genuinely very popular, and had one of the nicest arenas in the league, everything I could find out about why they didn't host an All-Star Game was more or less to do with the fact that it was out in the middle of the suburbs. There was really nothing around it. Across the street from where it was and where it's currently being demolished, it's a highway off-ramp, a couple of industrial parks. Literally the next thing across the street from it on Harmon Road is a garbage dump. And then across the street, there's a couple of gas stations and some factories and a bar that never really got off the ground. And everything I could find said they wanted something. Every year they would always pick some place that was nicer weather. You got to remember, this event is usually in mid to early February, about a week or two after the Super Bowl. And they wanted something where people could get up, walk around, do stuff in a downtown area, and that just wasn't where the Palace was. So they didn't have it there for the almost 30 years that it was out there. And then now that the team's down in LCA, or Little Caesars Arena in downtown Detroit, that is now an option. They could do that. And they most likely will in the next few years. They just haven't announced it yet. The team's only been down there for 3 years, and they're eventually going to do it. It also doesn't help that when it comes to things like the All-Star Game, the NBA doesn't have the rule that the NFL does when it comes to Super Bowl. If you want a Super Bowl in your town, you have to have a team. Seems logical, right? You'd think like, well, of course. Well, why wouldn't you? Well, that would be like in times past when I think it was 96 to 2016, LA wasn't allowed to have a Super Bowl because they didn't have a team in that area. Now they have two, in the Chargers and the Raiders. Chargers and the Rams. The Raiders are going to Vegas, which, by the way, they're getting a brand new stadium in Vegas. So that means sometime in the next few years, you are going to see a Super Bowl in Vegas, and God have mercy on their souls. Is that going to be a crazy party? Anyway, I'm off track. in LA, they weren't allowed to have the Super Bowl. Now they are. But now, since one of the teams, the Chargers, left San Diego, they can no longer host Super Bowls. Anyway, this is a rule the NBA does not have. The NBA has, in the past, had the All-Star Game in cities where it does not have a team. Most recently, it would be 2007 when the game was held in Las Vegas. Now, as we see here, we have Detroit Pistons, Pontiac Silverdome, February 4th, all that stuff. Cost of this at the time was $2.50. For comparison, I did look it up. The program like this that was being sold this past week in Chicago was only $10. I would have thought it would have been more, but that doesn't seem too bad for 40-some years of inflation. All right, as you can see, it's got a... this is the front cover. Looks pretty good. We got the outline of the Silverdome right there. Down beneath it, we have the outline of Detroit, the skyline of what it would look like in the late 70s. And actually, they did a pretty good job of it. The big towers over here is the Renaissance Center, which is down there. I assume this big one over here on the left is the Guardian Building. It looks a lot like that. So whoever did their job, they did a really good job on this. The back cover is a ad for Nike, the old way, showing an old Converse Chuck Taylor shoe. Now you got to remember, in 1979, Nike wasn't what it is now, the international powerhouse of sports, fashion, and shoes. They were the new guys on the block, and you got to remember, this would be, this would be a good 5-6 years, 6 years really, before Michael Jordan would be drafted and would help make the Air Jordan brand and Nike as a result into what it is today. Now, of course, Nike had other people along the way who were spokespersons, but in my opinion, really took off with Michael Jordan back in, I want to say 85 would be when he got sponsored by Nike. You can see that's what it looks like. It even goes so far as to say, like, Nike, Beaverton, Oregon. Like, now it should say, Nike, we're everywhere. All right, now we're going to open this up. It's not in the greatest condition. It's beat around. Seen some action. On the left, we have an ad for a Monte Carlo 79. Now, I'm not going to go off and read a lot of this because this video would be about 2 hours long, but I am going to try and get a nice enough shot, so if you want to zoom in and read it on your computer, you can do that. We got the Chevy Monte Carlo. Over here, we have an ad for Converse shoes. Once again, the same brand that Nike is bashing on the very back of this. You got that Dr. J right there. Probably the biggest star in the NBA at the time. When Magic Johnson and Larry Bird would be drafted, I think, a year or two later. So this is that weird period in the late 70s where probably the two biggest stars in the NBA are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Julius Erving here. Next page. More shoe ads. Kenny. Now, some of you older people, I'm sorry, yeah, I said older, might remember some of this. I don't. Kenny, the Great American Shoe Store. I see some Puma. I see a lot of stripes here. We got a company that made this publication right here. That's pretty cool. Over here we got two letters from the guy on the left. He is former owner Bill Davison, who owned the Detroit Pistons from 1974 to his death in 2009. That's a letter he wrote welcoming everyone to All-Star Weekend. And this is Larry O'Brien. He was the commissioner of the NBA for years. The little fact, the trophy that is given out every year is named after him. We have a look back here, 20 years later, at the look back at the 1959 All-Star Game. Nice retrospective. Bob Pettit and Elgin Baylor were the two big stars that year. Here's the thing going over the All-Star heritage of all the players. Detroit heritage here. As you see, this thing is some of this stuff is actually in pretty good shape so far. It's not terrible. Someone took decent care of it. Here's we're talking about from that 1959 All-Star game. There's Bob Pettit and Elgin Baylor. Talking about them getting their MVP honors from 20 years earlier. One of the great things about this is the ads you will find in there. Like for this one, for the Birmingham Camera Company. Or Camera Shop, I should say. It's kind of cool they have that. I mean, just get a good look at the people in there. This looks like people who would be really into cameras in the late 70s. They look like they're going on an adventure to find Bigfoot or something. I like it. I think it's pretty cool. They got their own blimp. Anyway, let's keep moving. We got an award for Dr. J, getting something from Trident. There you go. Over here, Hagar Separates. I believe that's Dick Vitale back when he was a coach, but I'm not sure. I think it's some big one. Use your... Ah, yes, the new thing. Credit cards. Look at that. Here we have a page for the All-Star records, or the records as they stood in 1979. Sports phone betting, I guess. Ad for posters that you could get at the time, the different players from the different divisions. You could get these standard poster, 2 by 3 feet back then. See down there, they were $2.50 or $3, 3 for $6. Not sure why Waterloo, Iowa would not have expected that'd be their mailing hub, but whatever. I'm fairly certain this offer is not around anymore. Here's some look at some of the East All-Stars who are going to be in this game. Larry Keenan and Calvin Murphy. It's an ad for JCPenney. This is a local ad. Down at the bottom, you see all the JCPenney stores that there were at the time. Not sure how many of these are still around. Converse All-Star low-cut shoe back then was only $13. The high top was $14. That's pretty interesting. We got some more East All-Star. Campy Russell and Elvin Hayes. Elvin Hayes might be my pick for a guy who has the coolest basketball name there is. Speaking of names, a name you don't see anymore, the Washington Bullets. Based on the gun crime in D.C. in the 1990s, they changed the name to the Washington Wizards, which, while it's an alliteration, Bullets just sounded cooler. An ad for 3M. All this stuff they do. Electronic mail. That'll never take off. Sometimes I see phone numbers in here. I'm like, I want to call, see if it's still... Like, who has that number now? More All-Stars, Doug Collins and Bob Dandridge. Ad for the official socks of the time. Sponsored by the Players Association. That would be why they have their names, but there's not they don't have the team names on them, so they're just hoping that by the fact it's a white guy in a green uniform, you can surmise that that's supposed to be the guy at the Boston Celtics, and it is, because it's John Havlicek. Wes Unseld for the Washington Bullets at the time, as we saw. Bob McAdoo. We're getting close to the middle here. This is an ad, a Jeep Cherokee ad. Pretty cool. All the stuff you could get at the time for it. A subsidiary of American Motors Corp. Over here we have, this would be the stat sheet if you wanted to follow along in the audience, write down the points and whatnot. Another ad for socks. Pro 77, same one. They really like to push in their socks here. Schlitz beer. Look at that. More for the wet. This time we got some people for the Western All-Star. Dennis Johnson. Dennis Johnson is, if it's the same one I'm thinking of, is going to get traded to the Boston Celtics in a little while. He's going to sign with them, and he's going to be a part of some great and heartbreaking Pistons Celtics games that are going to come up in the next few years here. As you can see, this is in the greatest shape. Look at it. It's an ad for Hilton. You know, I can't help but look at this and the Hilton stuff and go, there's a certain aesthetic and style to certain things involving big cities and business in the late 1970s, and I can't decide if it's cool or hideous. Like really, it's very much of its time. We got some more West All-Stars here. An ad for Burger Chef. The Pistons. More highlighting the All-Stars here for this time for the West. Strohs advertising. They're back in the day when the returnable rate in Michigan was 5 cents and not the 10 cents it is now. That's pretty neat. The All-Star trainers, the referees, people who are going to be involved in this game. Mike, Kansas City. Okay, let's break this down here. This one's interesting. The guy on the right, Bill Jones, I don't know him. Kansas City Kings. Some of you might have realized that the Kansas City Kings used to be, before this, they were the Cincinnati Royals. They moved to Kansas City, and Kansas City has a team called the Kansas City Royals, so they had to change their name to the Kansas City Kings. A few years after this, they're going to move to Sacramento, where they are the Sacramento Kings to this day, and they have been consistently involved in rumors that they are going to move to Las Vegas, as their owners are the Maloof brothers, and if I remember correctly, they own the Palms Casino. And also, let's be honest, the Las Vegas Kings, that just writes itself. The guy on the left is Mike Abdenauer, who is doing his best Lionel Richie impression right here. Mike has been on the athletic trainer staff for the Pistons for. He's probably still there. He was up there. He was there all through the Palace. I saw him multiple times at games. I think he's still doing it. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's a young him right there. A local ad for Channel 2 Sports. I don't recognize any of these people. I should. Another ad for socks, man. They really liked socks back then. Here's an old ad for the Detroit Plaza Hotel. Also the Renaissance Center. I guess Renaissance Center is what you call the building, all of it, and the Renaissance Center is the hotel part attached. It's pretty nice. Now, we're getting close to the end here. We have an ad here for Oldsmobile dealership. Sorry. Wonderful world of Mariotto. Oldsmobile. Now, I'd like to point this out. This is around the time the NBA started using computers for MVP balloting. Honeywell was in charge of it. You can read all that stuff here. Hold this here for you. Now, I just want to point out the technology they were using at the time. One, right from the start, this year's procedures will be considerably more glamorous. In first place, the collectors will be members of the Detroit Pistons Classy Chassis. If you don't know what that is the name of the the cheerleader squad at the time. I don't think that name would fly today. Fast for a little bottom. The system this year by Honeywell will include 128 kilobytes of memory. Oh my God. 10 megabytes of disk storage, 300 card per minute card readers, and a VIP 7200 console. Now, I'm sure in 1979 all that was very impressive, and I'm sure it cost like $90,000 or something ridiculous. But yeah, and then at the bottom we have that, all those people there. Look at that computer. Over here they made a basketball out of computer parts. Pretty cool. Now, this is the only real bad part about this here. Someone ripped this at one point. I have no idea what's not part of what would have been here. It's a nice shot of the exterior of the Silverdome. Once again, this building stood until actually just a couple years ago. I think we have video somewhere on this channel of the attempted implosion that didn't go well. I was there in person. Not all the dynamite went off. The support columns on the outside got blown off, but it wasn't enough to cave in the upper deck. So, yeah, the stadium you couldn't do anything with now has no support and unexploded dynamite in it. So you've made it exponentially more dangerous. And that was the next day. They just came in, threw in a whole bunch of dynamite, and just left no room for error, essentially. Blew it up, didn't really advertise it, and it was such a loud explosion that people in towns a few over had no idea what it was and just kind of pieced it together that, oh yeah, that thing that was supposed to happen yesterday, I guess they did it today. Side note, a friend of mine who lives in Lake Orion, and if you want to just type in Lake Orion or the Pontiac Silverdome is, it's I don't know, it's a good distance away. The explosion was so loud that he in his car told me that his first thought upon hearing it, when it finally was brought down, was that America was at war and Detroit just got bombed, believe it or not. So that's a lot of kaboom power. Over here, they talk about the Silverdome a bit. All the different stats, when it opened, all that stuff, who made it. That's pretty cool. On the back page here, bring it all full circle. You got a picture of the Classy Chassis, who were the dance squad at the time. Once again, don't think you get away with that name. Crazy George, not exactly sure who he is. I am assuming he was in-house entertainment or something. It's pretty cool. They had parts in All-Star Weekend there. Next over here, we got an ad for Footlocker. Another page with more All-Star records and awards at the time. This was all the players who'd ever been in an All-Star game as of 1979. Pretty cool, I think. An ad for Seagram's. That's... Yeah, you look back at this and you realize that, man, in 1979, socks and liquor were big business. Yes, the last page here. Surprised we didn't see more of these in here. An ad for Winston cigarettes. And over here, a ad for Walt Disney World and Eastern Airlines. So that's pretty neat. I don't think Eastern Airlines is around anymore. Pretty neat. All in all, there's the back thing again. Pretty interesting thing here. I'm glad you tuned in today. It's a lot of fun. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't.